What is going on, you guys? We are back with another episode. I'm your host, Truly Culture Shock. Appreciate you guys for tuning in on all platforms. Another week in the books. It is showtime this week. We got a rivalry matchup, week 5. The Indianapolis Colts are traveling down to Duval, playing the Jacksonville Jaguars. It's going to be an interesting game, man. It's going to be an interesting game. We got a lot to talk about, injury report, things of that nature. But I'm not here alone. I got my guy Landon with me. Landon, how we doing?
Well, doing about as well as I can do for it being Jaguars week in Jacksonville. That's never a good week normally for the Colts. It hasn't been for the last decade. So, putting on a brave face and we'll attack this thing together.
Yes, absolutely. I'm gonna have you in good spirits, man. You know me. I'm the positivity, the light that everyone sees when it's dark. Of course I'm biased as well, but moving forward, we got to talk about this game, man. Week 5, the Indianapolis Colts travel to Jacksonville for the first time this year. It should be an interesting one. Both teams on certain directions going towards the season. One's going on an incline, one's on a decline. But I mean, it's never too late for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Of course, the Jacksonville Jaguars in Duval always has the Colts number, no matter who's at quarterback on our team, no matter who's head coach, no matter what the defense looks like. The Jaguars at home against the Colts always has the advantage, man. They're just pretty good. I don't know why. I don't know why they're so good at home, but it is what it is. They protect that turf. But I gotta ask you, what is the difference between a rivalry game and a regular game? Because of course, you see the Colts, they beat the Steelers, they got smoked by the Packers, they beat the Bears. But whenever it's the rivalry game, it's just ups the ante a little bit more. So some people might not understand how deep this game goes. And a lot of Colts fans and a lot of Jaguars fans, they hate each other. But because that's how the tension grows when it's a divisional game. Just let us know what the rivalry game and what's the difference between them.
Well, really, it all kind of starts in the division, right? You hear that every year from coaching staff. It's like it starts in the division. This is our main goal: is winning the division, getting to the playoffs. So obviously, there's a lot of game planning that goes around, I guess, or is involved when you're playing divisional opponents as every year. Like these are games like you circle every year and you kind of put an emphasis on it puts an emphasis on like team building, it puts an emphasis on game planning, like all of it is for the division. And not only that, but like these two teams, they know each other so well, and that goes for any divisional opponent. Like especially whenever you have a coaching staff now, and Jacksonville has been there. I believe this is like 3 or 4 years for them. The Colts now going into the second year of Shane Steichen, so like they've seen each other twice. They know the schemes twice. They know how each other likes to plays. So a lot of that is involved as far as like why you see divisional games are so close for the most part. They're so different than any other week because it's the NFL. Any week, anybody can beat you, right? But you're kind of hard pressed to see a ton of divisional games be blowouts. Let's look at last night, for example, with Atlanta and Tampa Bay. Like, what a fantastic game that was.
Great
Went into
game.
overtime, great game. But even though this is, for Atlanta, this is a new coaching staff with a new quarterback and all that. But a lot of these guys have seen each other. Like, how many times do you think Mike Evans and the DBs for Atlanta have battled with Chris Godwin and Evans and all those guys? Like numerous years in a row now, those guys have went to battle against each other. So that's why you see so many close games whenever you see divisional matchups. Is it's just because the familiarity with these guys and like what works against them, what doesn't work against them, and all that. So it truly is what makes, I think, the NFL so special, is not only just for the fact that, like I said, any given week, any team can beat you, but these divisional games, it's a chance to really form rivalries against guys like Michael Pittman, Quentin Nelson, even, pretty much anybody on this Colts roster right now. They've never won a game in Jacksonville, ever. So, like, how much do you think this game means to them, knowing that they've never won a game in Jacksonville? Meanwhile, Trevor Lawrence is 4-2 against the Colts. And That's not great whenever you consider that's basically a quarter of the wins that he has in the NFL um, have basically come against one team. Um, so it's interesting for sure, and it's exciting.
It definitely is exciting. Shout out to Nathan. He said, "Hello guys, I got some numbers for you. The past 9 years in Duval County, the Jaguars outscored the Colts 269 to 126. It's a crazy number to think
Yeah,
about,
and here
man.
I was talking about divisional games being close, and down in Jacksonville, man, they really have not been close at all. It's been numerous blowouts, and a lot of that, which I'm sure we'll get into here in a minute, but a lot of that's turnover related. So we'll talk about that here in a minute.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. But before we get into it, we got to go down the injury report list. Just came out today, of course. We got the Friday practices, who practiced, who didn't, and now we got the official, who's going to be out for this game. I'm going to go over the players that are questionable first. You got Ryan Kelly, who's questionable to play. You got Braden Smith, who's questionable to play, and Anthony Richardson is questionable to play. The players that are out are three important players. Of course, every player is important. These are some captains too, man. So Kenny Moore is out another week. He will not be playing. Quiddy Pay is out another week, will not be playing. And Jonathan Taylor is out this week. He will not be playing. Of course, we talked about this last week with Jonathan Taylor's certainty if he's going to play or not and how the offense is going to look at things at that direction. But Jonathan Taylor missing this week is super crucial for this offense, man, because he's the workhorse, man. That guy is a freak of nature. But like I said, playing in Jacksonville, you can have the greatest players on your team, and they just tend to struggle in Duval. I don't know what it is, but Jonathan Taylor missing this game is going to be very crucial for this offense, man. Honestly, and with Anthony Richardson being questionable as well, the offense is probably going to look a lot different than what it's used to seeing, especially with Joe Flacco. Instead of coming off the bench, he might be starting. It's a lot of questions to raise concerns. So first, we got to start with Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor's not playing this game. What's your thoughts on him not being available and how the offense may look?
Well, it's going to look a lot different, right? It's it's no secret that Jonathan Taylor is the engine that makes this Colts offense run. Um, he's a guy that at any given moment, he can take it to the house. He's what people refer to as like an ambient guy, right? He's a guy that keeps you up at night, and you do your best to limit anything he does. So with him not being out there, I'm sure Jacksonville, they're feeling a whole lot better knowing that, hey, we don't have to game plan against Jonathan Taylor. It's a lot easier to contain, Trey Sermon and Tyler Goodson than it is, JT. So his, not having him out there, and I expect it to be the case moving forward, at least for the next, 2 or 3 weeks as well, on top of this week. So this is the same ankle that he has had the issues with over the last couple of years. It's the same ankle, I believe, he kind of had the surgery on. Um, and they're going to be, precautious with him because this is only week 5. Like, you would much rather have Jonathan Taylor for the stretch run, especially when those matchups get a lot more difficult. When those opponents, get a lot more difficult here after, I believe, like the next, 2-3 weeks, it does seem on paper the Colts have a little bit easier matchups. But yeah, not having JT out there it's not good at all. But I think the thing you can hang your hat on is the fact that the Colts offensive line it has played so well this year. So I think that will minimize some of the loss of JT is having that offensive line. This is going to be a much more of a like traditional downhill running back game with Trey Sermon, who is much more of an in between the tackles type runner. Um, doesn't really hit the edge, doesn't really have the speed. That's more of Tyler Goodson's game. But Trey Sermon's a guy like you don't really see a lot of negative rushes from Trey Sermon because you hear people talk about, he falls forward and gains a yard, and he's a guy that can absorb contact and gain you 2 or 3 yards even whenever he's hit in the backfield. So with the push this offensive line's getting, maybe those 2 or 3 yards, maybe they turn into 4 or 5 yards, and then you're in a positive game script. So, and And not to be understated either is Trey Sermon. He's the best pass protection back on this team. So even if Joe Flacco does have to play, we know Joe Flacco does not have the mobility of Anthony Richardson. He doesn't have the sack avoidance of Anthony Richardson. Like defenses are going to be able to tee off on Joe Flacco and not have to worry about whether or not he's escaping the pocket and making you pay for it. So having Trey Sermon back there in pass pro is going to be a really, really crucial thing that might go overlooked this week for the Colts.
Absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned that with Joe Flacco potentially starting, and you know how the offense would look with Trey Sermon being good pass pro and things like that. But like I said, we're going to Duval, right? If they know Joe Flacco starting this game, I think everybody in America knows the Jaguars are going to send heat almost every play, no question. They're just going to have to simplistic because you said that he's not mobile. We all know that. So I'm pretty sure they're going to dial up a lot of more players to try to go get him. And it's going to be interesting to see who starts this week. With Richardson being questionable, I would ask you personally, if he was to play, would you want to risk Richardson going out there for a few snaps, or would you just let him rest this week since his limited and Flacco's production last week held the Colts over a little bit? What's your thoughts on Richardson being questionable? Should he play or should he sit?
Well, really, it comes down to like based on how he feels on game day, and like you have to understand too, like this is a home game for Anthony Richardson, right? He grew up in Gainesville. That's where he lives. That's where he attended college. Like this is a big game for him. And players, especially when they're returning home like that, if they happen to come from a place where there is an NFL team, if they're returning home, he's going to do everything in his power to play this game, right? But I also think this is kind of where you need to kind of protect the player from themselves. So even if he's going to do everything he can to play, if he is not feeling up to, being able to be himself, the true Anthony Richardson, the dynamic athlete, um, and he is going to have to become more of a drop back passer in this game. If he does play due to the injury, then at that point, I do think it is a little bit safer to set him just this week because what you don't want to happen is him not have the mobility and the sack avoidance. And I kind of got into this little discourse on Twitter earlier about it whenever I tweeted something out about him probably being a game time decision. And at that point, you're probably erring on the side of caution. And I think you saw them err on the side of caution last week as well with him. They didn't throw him back out there. They're going to protect him from himself. And the worst thing you can do for Anthony Richardson is put him out there and have him be a drop back passer, not being able to avoid the rush, not being able to escape the pressure and take more hits because the risk you put yourself in is say he does take another hit, another big sack to that oblique, to that hip area. Now, instead of him just missing this 1 week, now he's possibly out multiple weeks. And then you're playing catch up. And yeah, sure, it sounds all good and it's exciting whenever he plays. Look, it's week 5. They're 2-2. They're not in any danger of this season getting away from them. Even if they lose this game, which most Colts fans have them losing this game because of the history in Jacksonville. You're not in danger of losing the season if you lose this game, but you are in danger of losing your season if you throw Anthony Richardson out there and he gets hurt even more because he rushed himself back. And now Joe Flacco, instead of just playing this 1 week, Joe Flacco is playing the next 4 to 6 weeks. And that's what you don't want to see from Anthony Richardson moving forward. Like the guy needs the reps, but you also have to be smart about it. So I would much rather sacrifice this 1 week than have something happen to him and then sacrifice half the season.
Honestly, I agree with you. If I had the choice to let Richardson go or not, I will ask him first, of course, if he's able to go. Maybe get like a few snaps, see if he's comfortable or not. And if he's not comfortable, he'll tell the coach like, "Hey, something's not right," and they'll pull him. I mean, it's that simple. So I think he could start off the game for a few snaps, and then if he doesn't feel it, then pull him out and put in Joe Flacco. I
Well,
think that's perfectly fine.
I don't even think it would be the aspect of just putting him out there for a few snaps. I think you'll know pregame. Like the doctors and stuff, they'll be working with him pregame to see how he feels. And if there's really like any indication of like hey, like my hips still sore, I can't move, I can't drive into the throws, um, stuff like that. Like there's no like why would you even put him out there to begin with? Like if it's not there and you know that it's not there in pregame, which they will, there's no sense in risking it. So just set him, have him rehab, have him get ready for next week, because it's going to be another big week as well. Next week, or really the next couple weeks, are going to be a chance for the Colts, playing the Dolphins and the Titans to really make some headway. So yeah, there's no sense in putting him out there for a couple plays just to like see how he feels and putting him at risk. So if he's not good enough to go in pregame, and the doctors will know if he is or if he isn't, just set him. Like just get Flacco the rep, or get Flacco the week.
I agree. I agree. I'm confident with Flacco. Honestly, with Jonathan Taylor missing this week as well, we figured that this is going to be more of a passing game anyway, right? I think it's going to be a lot of more, balls thrown in the air, and that's a good sign for these receivers and the tight end group, and especially if Flacco is playing like he hits the targets in stride and going up against this Jaguars defense. I think you know more than I do. Like their defense is a little shady when it comes to those passes, and I think Flacco could have himself a good field day. What's your thoughts about that?
Yeah, well, the Jaguars, I believe they're top 10 against the run, which a lot of that's game script because teams are just kind of throwing all over them, and they're not really running the ball on them. But they, if they do have a strength, it does seem to be against the run. But they rank near the bottom of the league, like top 5 worst in the league in pass defense, and that's where they're very vulnerable, especially in the middle of the field. I think this could be another big week for like Josh Downs in that slot. This could be a big week for Michael Pittman Jr. across the middle of the field. And, Flacco is like, if he does end up going, like, Flacco is going to be a type of guy that where like you can't really like fool him, right? Like he's seen so much in this league. Like he knows where he's probably going pre-snap. He knows how to get the ball out on time, maintain these longer drives and keep the defense off the field. So I do think if there was a week where you would kind of like Joe Flacco to throw the ball around, it would be against this Jaguars defense, especially looking at their injury report, which we didn't really talk about. Like they could be without Darnell Savage, who's their starting safety. He's questionable. Joshua Hines Allen is questionable, who's the best pass rusher on their team, one of the better pass rushers in the league, in my opinion. He's questionable with a concussion. And Devin Lloyd as well, one of the linebackers there, he's questionable as well. So they could be without 3 defensive starters on their roster too. And this could be like the perfect mix for Joe Flacco. And they play a lot of man coverage too. Like they play a lot of man coverage. They don't really drop into a ton of zones. So they try to match up. And I'll tell you, like, there's 2 guys who absolutely annihilate man coverage on this team that I think could have really big weeks throwing the ball. One of those obviously is Josh Downs. Like we saw what he did last week. And if you can manipulate defenses and get him lined up on a linebacker or something like that, like he's going to win that matchup 99% of the time. And you're going to be able to get him the ball in the middle of the field. The other guy who absolutely has destroyed man coverages this week or this year so far that just he doesn't have the stats to back it up is AD Mitchell. Like if they do decide, they want to line up, get AD Mitchell in 3-by-1 sets and have him isolated in one-on-one matchups against man coverage, especially with Joe Flacco, this could be the week for AD Mitchell to really kind of turn the film into actual stats, because the film shows, hey, this guy he's annihilating guys in coverage. He's getting open at like a super high rate. He's creating separation. He just hasn't got the ball, whether it's been the design of the offense or whether Anthony Richardson's just missed him, by a few yards. Like Joe Flacco, I don't think you're that worried about the accuracy concerns with him. So this could be a big AD Mitchell week as well.
I know a lot of Colts fans are going to love to hear that, hearing AD Mitchell could have a potential breakout game, especially against this team. I was going to mention the injury report. I'm glad you did already, which was awesome. Evan Ingram on the offensive side, who pretty much tore the Colts apart last year when he was debuted in Jacksonville. He's questionable to go out as well for the offense. We can transition to the defensive side now. The Colts defense going up against the Jaguars offense, which is again um, one of those offenses that just cannot figure it out. Of course, I mean, granted, I still love Lawrence's game, no matter how much he struggles. I mean, his the team is just dysfunctional. They're all out of place. They're all out of place, right? But if you give Lawrence time to make the read and get the pass off, he can pretty much do it, dissect anyone. And his ball placement is really, really good. We seen it last year. He put the ball in so many places when we thought it was an interception, but it was just right in the bread basket for his receivers. Um, but this offense for the Jaguars, it's going to be an interesting one. They got Brian Thomas Jr. this year coming out the draft. A very solid receiver, who can who can also have a good game. And the question goes into how much pressure is the Colts defensive line going to put on Trevor Lawrence? And I think that's a huge question going into this week. Of course, I think Hurricane Dio could have another good game this week against this Jaguars team. If a lot of people forgot, Hurricane Dio's debut against Jacksonville was a strip fumble on Trevor Lawrence. A lot of people do forget that, but it was a huge play for him. Another big week for him. Another big week for this defense. They got another quarterback who could pretty much dissect them if you give him the opportunity to do so. But what's your thoughts on the defensive line going up against Lawrence this week?
Well, to me, like this is going to be the biggest key to the game, right? Or well, the second biggest key to the game. I'll talk about the first biggest key here in a minute. Um, the the defensive line is going to have to show up. And now Quiddy Pay's rolled out. Obviously, Tyquan Lewis just got put on IR. Samson Ebukon's on IR. DeForest Buckner's on IR. This defensive line has just been ravaged by injuries. Like they have so many players that are just out right now, and it's not great. So you're basically looking for guys to step up, namely, Leatu Latu. He needs to be the guy, I think, that leads the charge between him and Dio. This week, Grover Stewart's going to be a big part of stopping the run. Where Jacksonville has like really struggled has been like the explosive plays, the deep plays, and that's where Trevor Lawrence has struggled a lot because he's just there's too much pressure on him, and he's kind of seeing pressure even when it's not there. And he kind of has this thing like very similar to Anthony Richardson, where he has this tendency to fade away and throw off his back foot instead of stepping into his throws. That's why you're seeing so many misses from him. That's really why you see so many misses from Richardson too. Whenever he's able to have a clean pocket, step up, set his feet, and drive the ball, Trevor Lawrence can be very, very accurate. And I think Richardson, for that matter, too, whenever he tends to get like that as well. So it's a very dangerous game, and Trevor Lawrence has his best career games, best passer rating, best completion percentages, all that have come against the Indianapolis Colts and this zone defense. Just put it in perspective, I actually looked up some numbers today, getting ready for this matchup. Right now, the Colts, obviously they run a ton of zone. They're one of the most zone-heavy defenses in the league. We know what Gus Bradley does. But they've allowed 40% first down plus touchdown rate, which is bottom 5 in the league. They're allowing 7.25 yards per coverage snap and 9.2 per yards per coverage target, all rank in bottom 5 of the league. It's just not great, and you cannot give Trevor Lawrence that. On the flip side, Brian Thomas Jr. is top 10 in the league in yards per route run, and I believe he's top 5 in separation score against zone coverage. So you're facing really an uphill battle if they come out in this soft zone coverage and they're giving Trevor Lawrence, these easy completions to where he's just able to take a 3 to 5 step drop, hit a flat or an out route to Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram, the tight end position, even Cole Strange last year, who's been the starter this year so far. He had a touchdown last year against the Colts. Tight end position has absolutely ate them up because these tight ends are just able to settle in zone coverage. And Trevor Lawrence is getting the ball out fast. So if you allow Trevor Lawrence to get the ball out quickly against this soft zone coverage, he will take that every day. Where he's really struggled is against man coverages with pressure coming at him. And those are literally the two things that Gus Bradley is the exact opposite of. Now, he has gotten a little bit better as far as like he is playing more like cover two, more quarters coverage, even kind of throwing a little bit of cover six in there too. Um, but you've seen whenever he kind of goes to that, those too high safeties with shell coverages and stuff, that's where the Colts have had a huge issue stopping the run. So what that forces them to do, and why they've had so much success against the run the last few weeks, but you've seen, Caleb Williams throw for 350. You've seen Justin Fields throw for 300 plus. Is because Nick Cross is coming. He's having to bring Nick Cross down into the box to stop the run, and that's leaving, going back to that cover three single high safety, and they're playing this off coverage, and you do that against a guy like Brian Thomas Jr. or Christian Kirk, you are just asking to be burnt all day long. And they're getting open at a very high rate. Why they haven't been hit at a very high rate is because Trevor Lawrence's inaccuracy due to pressure. So if you do want to play with fire, like you have got to make sure you're not going to get burned, and you have to get pressure on Trevor Lawrence in this game, because if you don't, you will lose. They will lose this game. And I'm telling you right now, this isn't me being like, this is just what the film says, this is what the numbers say. This isn't the place for like rah-rah cheerleading, right? If they play off zone coverages and do not get pressure on Trevor Lawrence, they will lose this game 100%. So that is, to me, the second biggest key in the entire matchup, is for this defensive line, namely Leatu Latu, who has just been right there so many times. But the positive thing is he's not playing Caleb Williams and he's not playing Justin Fields this week. Trevor Lawrence can move. Like, he's not immobile. He's not Joe Flacco right back there. He can move a little bit, but he's not as explosive of a runner to get out of situations like we saw Justin Fields get out of last week, where Latu, in my opinion, he should have had 2 sacks last week that Justin Fields just made a fantastic play. So I think this could be a week that, we talked about AD Mitchell on the other side of the ball. This could be the week as well for Leatu Latu, and you see those those 2 top rookie picks really kind of make their put their stamp on this game for the first time this season.
I agree 100%. I definitely feel like Latu can, definitely hit the corner this week and actually hit the quarterback. And you don't have to really worry about the elusiveness or running out of the pocket and getting away from him, because I think Latu he's going to get Lawrence. He's going to get Lawrence this week. I really do believe so. But like I said, this is going to be a huge, huge game, and
And
it's
what they're
it's so
probably going to do too, and like I didn't even talk about this, but like what they're probably going to do too is, because Latu, and we've already seen this, right? The first game of the season we saw this, where they already had tight end help over there. They're going to chip him. They're going to put a running back over there. They're going to give help to Latu's side. So who can step up in the absence of Quiddy Pay this week? Is it Isaiah Land, who had a sack last week? Not on the stat sheet. That was a sack. That was a BS call. He absolutely annihilated the guy. Is it another big Dio game? Can Dio continue the pace he's on? Because he has been, the last 2-3 weeks, he's been on fire. So can he continue doing what he does? Even Taven Bryan up the middle. Obviously you don't want him in there during rushing down or running downs, but if you get off to a fast start, which I think is really crucial, and make the Jaguars have to throw the ball in pass rushing situations, I think Taven Bryan can be a serviceable player for this team. And can you kind of like put together like a quasi NASCAR package with like, Adebawore, Bryan, Dio, Latu, like maybe some of that. And then like maybe you even see him. They actually ran like a little bit of exotic blitzes last week as well. So maybe Gus Bradley continues this trend of like maybe blitzing a little bit more. Like, it's still well below the league average, but he is blitzing more compared to where he does in the past. So like, will we see that trend continue as well?
Yes, yes, yes. But yeah, Isaiah Land definitely. I'm pretty sure he's gonna want to have himself pop off the map this game for sure, especially after last week. But moving over to the secondary, Chris Lamont, you mentioned the exotic blitzes, a good replacement for Kenny Moore last week. He's going to have another big task this week because, I mean, he got a big plate to fill, man. It's another week when he's out there starting. It's going to be super crucial for this secondary to be on all cylinders this week. Of course, you mentioned the zone coverage and Lawrence and how he can dissect the secondary. But Cross, I think Cross can, I think Cross is going to have another good game for sure. There's no question of doubt, but it's everyone else. Where everyone else in question, especially with Brian Thomas Jr. out there. And one of the things that concerns me is like if Lawrence dissects his defense, this game will not be close. I think it's going to be a blowout. I think the Jaguars can put up more than 30 points if it gets that bad. And honestly, in my opinion, and I think that'll be the first time this year, besides the Packers game, that we'll see this defense get embarrassed and get hit in the mouth. But what's your concerns about the secondary going into this game?
Yeah, well, like I said, just like those numbers I just read off, teams haven't really had to throw the ball a lot, um, because they've been running the ball successfully, except for the last 2 weeks. Once that run game, by bringing Nick Cross in to be that box safety, the run game has been non-existent for teams against the Colts because you're bringing that extra safety in the box, and he has been playing like, to me, like one of the better run stopping box safeties in football. I heard somebody say it in the spaces we did yesterday. Somebody brought up kind of like early career, like Jamal Adams, right? Like how he played. Um, I think that's a very good comparison to the way he's playing ball right now. Now you don't want that guy in coverage, right? I think he's made some good plays in coverage, but like that's still not somewhere where like I'm feeling like super comfortable with him. But he's not going to kill you in coverage, but really where they've been utilizing him and where he's playing his best ball right now is near the line of scrimmage and stopping the run game. So what they're doing, and this is why you don't hear a lot about the other cornerbacks, like Sam Womack or something like that. Like he was only targeted 3 times last week. I believe he had 2 pass breakups on those. So shout out Sam Womack, played a fantastic game last week. He came in and did some really good stuff. So I think his snap count could kind of increase going forward. But why you don't see a lot of targets is because they are bringing, Julian Blackman to kind of cloud that side of the field and taking a lot of pressure. And they're really leaving Jalen Jones on an island one-on-one out there and saying like, hey, stop this guy. And where you're seeing a lot of the success for teams, passing the ball has been against Jalen Jones. I believe you look at, the yards given, like George Pickens, 7 for 113, Romo Dinze, 6 for 112 and a touchdown, Nico Collins, 6 for 117. Um, like other than, the splash plays where he obviously had the 2 turnovers in that Bears game, he's been getting cooked a lot against these like real physical, big bodied wide receivers. But I don't know really outside of like Nico Collins. I don't know if he's really seen a guy with the physical attributes because not only does Brian Thomas Jr. have the size advantage, and we've seen him struggle with size, Brian Thomas Jr. also has the speed advantage, and like he will blow the top off of defenses. And his route running to me has been much better than where I thought he was coming out of college. You can already see the improvement on tape with his route running. So he's getting open at an alarming rate. And do you leave Jalen Jones one-on-one coverage, playing soft zone coverage against a guy like Brian Thomas Jr., or do you kind of play with fire and move him up, to this press bump man coverage where if Brian Thomas Jr. gets a step on him, he doesn't have the recovery speed, to make up for that, and then he's getting torched downfield. So it's really going to be this big cat and mouse game of like how you deploy Jalen Jones and how they get Brian Thomas Jr. matched up when one-on-one situations with him, because I do think they can limit explosives as far as like Christian Kirk, as far as Evan Ingram, all that kind of stuff, because they're going to kind of push more coverage with Julian Blackman, linebackers, multiple corners to those guys to try to take away the explosives. So that's where you might see a little bit more of, like I said, like the quick outs, the flats, the, curl, digs, kind of stuff like that, to where these guys are setting in between the zones and just, taking 4 yards here, 5 yards here, 4 yards here, but they're not giving up, these huge explosive plays. But the explosive plays come from, how do you stop Brian Thomas Jr. if you're Jalen Jones? And can you withhold that matchup? If the answer is yes, then you're probably looking at a really good day on defense. If the answer is no, then you're looking at a very long, long day. And I'm playing Brian Thomas Jr. in multiple leagues this week, by the way, just so everybody knows.
I am not mad at that decision.
Brian Thomas Jr., move him to your starting lineup.
I'm not mad at that decision. I'm really not. When you were talking, I started to think about our offense again. Before we get into the linebackers, the offense, we're going up against a team that don't really force a lot of turnovers, right? And I feel like always when it comes to the Colts,
Any
the
turnovers.
the worst times that to make a team look successful is against us. I think if Flacco starts and he's not coming off the bench, I can see us turning the ball over more than once this week. So what's your thoughts about the turnover ratio for the Colts offense going up against a team that doesn't really turn the ball, doesn't get turnovers at all?
Yeah, so like you said, the Jaguars, they have 0 turnovers on the year, right? And that's part of the reason why they've struggled so much on defense, is the inability to force game-changing mistakes. That's a big reason why they're 0-4, is because the offense has turned the ball over and the defense is not getting any turnovers. Where the Colts have struggled in the past, and especially why you see, like that comment said, why you see such a huge discrepancy in scoring, 269 to 126, is because of turnovers. The Colts, for some reason, every time they go down to Jacksonville, it's a free for all of, do you want the football? They just give it up no matter what. Like last year, I went back while I was doing the Jaguars film review this week. I went back and watched last year's game with Gardner Minshew in Jacksonville. 3 interceptions, 1 lost fumble, 4 turnovers from Gardner Minshew in that game. And that's a big reason why Colts lost that game. It wasn't particularly close. Is because they just gave the ball away. I believe in the last 2 matchups in Jacksonville, I believe it's either 7 or 8 total turnovers. And you're not going to win football games giving the ball up at that kind of a rate. And for some reason, it always happens down in Jacksonville. So Joe Flacco, where he has kind of seen like more of a growth as he's become a veteran quarterback, especially in Cleveland last year. He's not a guy that really like puts the ball in super dangerous spots as far as throwing interceptions. I want to say I'd have to look it up, but Joe Flacco last year, I don't remember him throwing a ton of interceptions, which obviously he didn't play the whole season. But yeah, I mean, he gave it up 8 times total on the year, which is not great, but it's not, an indication of this guy's like super turnover prone. A lot of those, if I remember correctly, a few of those were actually just like tipped balls and dropped balls from Cleveland's wide receivers. So if he can play a clean game, and really where you're going to want to limit the turnovers, especially with him, is sack fumbles in the pocket. Because like I said, he's a guy that's not going to escape pressure. He's a guy that's not going to be able to like maneuver a ton in the pocket. So you really have to keep him clean and avoid those sack fumbles. So if they can get out of there with I think if they can get out of Jacksonville this week with a positive turnover differential, even if it's 2 takeaways on defense, 1 giveaway on offense, if you can just have for once a positive turnover ratio in Jacksonville, then I think like that's really a key. That is to me the biggest key in finally breaking this curse, is to stop giving the Jaguars the ball every time you're out there on offense.
Honestly, with no Jonathan Taylor and Richardson being in question, I still think this might be the best opportunity for the Colts to break this curse. I think this might be the best opportunity to do so, because this is the worst I can remember the Jaguars being as a fan. I mean, of course, they never had good seasons consistently, but they were on a rise at one point when they had the best defense and things of that nature. But
Back in
as of right now,
2017.
Right,
Whenever
right,
Gus
right.
Bradley coincidentally was he was the head coach, I believe. But he was in control of their defense. But I'll tell you what, that's my thing about Gus Bradley is like, yeah, his defense works whenever you got guys like Jalen Ramsey out there and AJ Boye in his prime and Richard Sherman and, you know, Cam Chancellor and like all these guys. Like, yeah, that offense works really well when you have Hall of Fame caliber talent, especially in the secondary. I believe he's only had, and I'd have to look at this tweet because I pulled the numbers. It was like a couple weeks ago, or maybe it was last month or something. But I believe Gus Bradley has only had a top 5 defense twice in his career. Both of those years, or what I think it was actually top 10. He's only had a top 10 defense twice in his entire career. Both of those years came whenever he had multiple all-pro players in the secondary. Right now, the Colts have 0 all-pro players in the secondary. So I don't see that trend going away this year for him. So this is going to be a huge game for the secondary. It's going to be a massive test, basically of attrition, right? Because both of these teams are pretty banged up, but the Colts especially are down multiple starters on defense. And this is just going to come up to execution from the players and the coaching staff, putting them in a position to execute and succeed.
I agree, and that comes towards Zaire Franklin and EJ Speed too, right? Because we just mentioned how the Jaguars don't get turnovers a lot. The Jaguars' run game has been one of the worst in the NFL. ECN cannot hold on to the football. He's not seeing the lanes like he's supposed to. I mean, he's had some struggles this year, honestly. And you know, the run game is a huge miss for the Jaguars. And if this defense lets the Jaguars get loose, like I said, it's going to be a 30-point score for the Jaguars. How important is it for the linebackers to lock in this game, like EJ Speed and Zaire? We know EJ is going to probably be in coverage a little bit too when it comes to the tight ends or things of that nature going across the middle, but they got to step up this week as well. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, they've played really good ball, over the last couple games after the abysmal start to the beginning of the season. They've really kind of held their own and played really good football, especially Zaire. I think has really kind of found his form of that top 100 player. Like he was voted this offseason, so he's been looking really great. Yeah, the Jaguars, their running game has struggled, namely because of linebacker play. I know last week when I was watching that game against the Texans, their linebackers were flying all over the field, and they were really putting them in precarious situations. Namely, the interior. Yeah, 16 years. Okay, so yeah, top 10 was just 4 times. So it wasn't 2 times. I was mistaken. It was 4 times. That was a good pull there. Yeah, but all 4 of those seasons, they had multiple Pro Bowlers and All Pro players in their secondary. Like I said, the Colts have 0 of those. You're facing an uphill battle. But to get back to the linebacker play, yeah, it's going to be a big game for them because where they have had success running the football, whenever there has been success, is on the edges. Right, like ETN, if you can get him on the edge and get him loose, he's still a very, very dangerous player. Where they've struggled is really going up the middle. So that's why I think like this is going to be really crucial. Like Nick Cross, EJ Speed, like these type of guys, really holding the edges now without Kwity Paye, now without Tyquan Lewis, who have both done tremendous job as run defenders on the edges. Can Latu hold up on the edge as far as a run stopper? Because so far he really hasn't. Like that's been like where his biggest struggle has been, is over pursuit and giving up the edge in the run game. So, and that's just part of like a young pass rusher's growth, right? Like eventually you see that play strength get up and they become able to hold their own in the edge. But I think that's why it's important for this offense to get off to a start similar to how they did last week in the defense. If you can get up, touchdown, 3 and out, touchdown, and you're kind of forcing the Jaguars to have to move away from this run game and kind of throw the ball a little bit more to where you're able to unleash those pass rushers, to where they're able to earn those pass rushing opportunities. um, that's going to be where the strength lies. So it's really going to come down to disciplined tackling. Like you can't be missing tackles, um, and really setting the edge. So I'm not really worried about like Dio. I'm not. Grover Stewart has been phenomenal again this year. He's one of the five best players in run stop percentage. He's top five in double team rate as well. So he's producing top five results against the run while being double teamed at a top five rate. So he's been phenomenal. There's that play last week where he absolutely just annihilated the center, like pushed him right back into Justin Fields, who then stumbles and has to like reach out and get the ball to Najee. As soon as Najee gets the ball, there's nothing you can do because Grover Stewart's right there. He's already blown the play up, and he did that by himself. So um, I think Davis has been phenomenal as well. But yeah, this is going to be a big game. As far as holding those edges and kind of forcing them, funneling them to try to run up the middle, which is not the strength of where they want to be at.
I agree. I agree, man. Two wishes I want this game before we get up out of here. There's two wishes I would like to see. I would like to see Alec Pierce have himself a decent game this week. Of course, we mentioned AD Mitchell and those guys, but having Alec Pierce success is always a W for me because I think he's having himself a decent season so far. Tight end touchdown, of course. So, and the last one, a Julian Blackman interception. He came close last week. He dropped the ball, but I would like him to get a pick this week as well. Is there any wishes you would like to see, like a Anthony Gould punt return or kick return?
Um, I mean, not particular. Like a positive turnover differential, I think, is going to be the key to this game. So that is really what I'm kind of zeroing in on. Um, is a positive turnover differential and a fast start like they had last week. If you can limit the turnovers and you can get off to a fast start to where Jacksonville has to play more into this drop back passing game with their offensive line, and you can unleash these, Latu and Dio and, those guys in the pass rush game, I think you can really have success this week. But it's hard. It's hard.
Amen. Amen. Amen to
This
that, man.
team, man, and I put it on Twitter, like, whenever you look at the record and you see 0-4, and like I'm going in to like break down, the play and watch the games and stuff, and I'm expecting to see just like a horrendous football team. And I really didn't. Like, I mean, they really are, and you can say this about any game, any team, like, and I understand that, and I get it, but it really is the truth. Like, they are really only a few plays away. And this is a 3-1 football team. Like, they, outside of the Buffalo game, I believe they've lost their other 3 games by a combined 13 points. Like, they were right there. They played Houston extremely tough. And we all know, what Houston did against Indianapolis in week 1. That was a very close game as well. So I think there's a lot more of an even playing field between the Colts and the Jaguars than it is of like, the Colts are 2-2 and the Jaguars are just this absolutely sucky 0-4 team. And if anything, that actually plays into the Jaguars' favor a little bit because they're just getting absolutely killed. Their coach is answering questions about his job. The players haven't won. These guys are going to be coming out there with something to prove. And if the Colts don't come out with that same intensity and they don't come out with that energy that they had that started last week against Pittsburgh, to where they're just flying all over the field and they just come out just boom, ready to go. If they don't come out with that kind of intensity, yeah, you could be in for another long game. Like this is a very dangerous Jaguars team.
And I heard the weather was supposed to be weird this week.
Yeah, there's a 60% chance of rain. From what it's Florida, so like that could change literally like an hour before the game.
In a half a quarter.
Yeah, like Florida's weather. My father-in-law lives in Florida. He actually lives about an hour away, or well, yeah, like he's a little bit further west of Gainesville, but he's not too far away. And their weather is like all over the place all the time. Like it'll be like, oh, it's gonna rain today, and then an hour later the sun's out, and it's just like the most beautiful day ever. And then it's like the exact opposite, where it's like, oh, I heard you guys are gonna have a great day. Are you gonna go fishing today? And he's like, oh, it's a hurricane out. So you never know what you're gonna get with Florida weather.
Yeah, I agree. The times I went, there was usually rain on one side, and on the other side, the cloud is sunny on the other side of the street. So it's very weird down there weather-wise. But hopefully, it's not too crazy for the game, and hopefully that it doesn't, hinder the Colts into having one of those horrendous games like we're used to seeing in Jacksonville. But it's going to be interesting to see, man. The Colts play on Sunday. It's going to be a show. Fingers crossed. Hopefully, my guy Trey Sermon and Goodson can carry the load with no Jonathan Taylor. Hopefully, Flacco can go out there and wheel and deal. It's going to be an interesting game. I'm going to be looking forward to your tweets. I'm going to be looking forward to the chats as well during the game because they always keep
That's
me
right.
entertained while I'm watching. It's going to be fun. But you guys tune in on Sunday to watch the game. We'll be back next week to give you a recap of it. But we appreciate you guys for tuning in this week episode. Let us know your comments in the comment section, the score predictions and things of that nature. That is Landon. This is Culture Shock. You guys have a great weekend. Stay safe as well, and we will see you guys next time.